Hi, good morning. My name's Doug Neville. I'm from the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. Thank you for joining us today, and we want to thank everybody that's watching across the state of Minnesota on our online feed. I want you to imagine working in your office with a 4,000-pound vehicle coming down the corridor or coming through your office. That's what first responders, police, fire, MnDOT, tow truck drivers have to face every day on our roads. So we're here today to talk about enhanced move over enforcement of the Ted Foss Move Over law this coming Monday. Monday, August 31st marks the 15-year anniversary of the loss of Corporal Ted Foss of the Minnesota State Patrol. Corporal Foss lost his life on Interstate 90 near Winona when a driver struck him on the side of the road. In response to Corporal Foss's death, Minnesota passed the Ted Foss Move Over law. And here today with us is Ted's mother, Shirley, who will be addressing the media for the first time since Ted's death. Shirley's going to be joined by Ted's sister, Winona, who will help her through it and maybe finish if Shirley can't finish her remarks. Also speaking today is Sheriff Kevin Torgerson from the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office and Lieutenant Tiffany Nielsen from the Minnesota State Patrol. And then behind me today we have 6 other sheriffs from across southeast Minnesota who came out to support this effort, as well as members from the Gold Cross Ambulance, Rochester Fire, and MnDOT. So with that, I'm going to ask Shirley Foss to come up to the podium. Each speaker will have some words, and then we'll open it up for questions afterward. Shirley?
Good morning. 15 years. It's hard to believe that it's been 15 years since my son's death. I still remember the moment that Trooper Dan Lewis came to my home to tell me that Ted was gone. Troopers also delivered that same horrifying news to each of my children, Ted's siblings. We all remember the sick feeling that came upon us when he saw that trooper at the door. As we all know, they don't deliver good news very often. The heartache I felt that day has not diminished. It has never gone away. I wake up every day thinking Ted will still walk through the door at any moment, and he would be alive today if the driver would have just moved over and let Ted do his job in a safe way. Ted worked for 15 years as a state trooper. Ted always wanted to be a trooper. He looked up to our neighbor, who was a trooper, and after Ted's brother was killed by a drunk driver, he knew this was the way he could make a difference. I knew Ted's job was dangerous, working on the road with fast-moving traffic. I prayed every night that Ted would come home safely, as I do with you too. I pray for all people that you come home safely. Ted was working a typical traffic stop when a delivery truck hit Ted on the side of the road, killing him. That was August the 31st, 2000. My worst fears became a reality. Ted left a huge family that loved him, including 2 young children, ages 2 and 5 at the time, and 6 siblings whose lives were forever changed by Ted's death. The Ted Foss Move Over law won't bring back my son, but I know in my heart that it's helped troopers to keep troopers, deputies, officers, paramedics, tow truck drivers, MnDOT workers, and anyone else working on the side of the road safe. Keep people safe. I'm proud to know that since my son's law went into effect, not one trooper has been killed on the side of the road. However, every time I hear about a trooper being hit, it's another opportunity to educate the public and remind them what happened to my son. Every day, I pray for law enforcement around the country and even the world, and everyone else who works on the side of the road to come home to their families. And I say the same thing because if you don't come home tonight, any of you, somebody will cry for you for the rest of their lives. On this, the 15th anniversary of my son's death, take a moment to think about Ted. Keep your eyes on the road, and please move over to protect those who are just trying to do a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. My memory of the days that followed Ted's death are still very vivid for me, as obviously they are clearly for the Foss family and this Minnesota State Patrol. Ted's and my connections were not just simply law enforcement. We both grew up in a small southeastern Minnesota town of Kenyon, and obviously since that day 15 years ago, I've come to know the Foss family and know Shirley almost as a surrogate mother in some cases. As a member of the Minnesota Law Enforcement Memorial Association Honor Guard and the planning team that led up to Ted's funeral that day, there was a lot of thoughts and comments and memories that I have. But I remember how stalwart the Foss family was, how caring the State Patrol was, and we want to remember that as well. I remember standing on the hill in the cemetery outside of Winona after TAPS was concluded and hearing the echo fading into the hills. Since then, as I mentioned, Shirley educates and talks about the education of Move Over, and we do the same thing through law enforcement and our officers and our new deputies. Here in Olmsted County, my recollection is we've had 2 officers who've been hit on traffic stops in my time that I can immediately recall. Both were hit by inattentive drivers, both as they assisted the State Patrol and Rochester Police on crashes. The first one was on Highway 52 right out here just north of Rochester and 75th Street, where the officer had pulled in his squad behind the crash and was simply helping to protect the scene and support the state troopers as they investigated the accident. When he was hit from behind, the officer suffered very minor injuries, or the deputy did, and obviously went on to complete a very good career. The second officer, I remember that day very well as well. We were in briefing. We got an immediate call of a crash on what's known as East Circle Drive here, County Road 22 outside of Rochester. The deputy was assigned to a brand new squad car that day, and his sergeant, our sergeant, said, "Okay, go, but don't put a scratch in that new car." As I was leaving the government center that day, we heard of the frantic calls and the crash that had occurred. An inattentive driver had just crashed into that new squad and our deputy. Again, very, in fact, I don't think he was injured at all. He was outside the car. But again, we were very lucky that day. And it just keeps bringing it home. As Shirley said, it's something that we all have to be aware of. Behind me, you see the sheriffs from around the region, officers, firefighters, and deputies, MnDOT workers. It's very important to them as we think of their families and think of what they do out there to help keep us safe, keep our roads clear, keep our roads clean, and keep our roads in good shape. These folks behind me are just a snapshot of the people who put their lives on the line to help motorists on Minnesota roads every day. Law enforcement, paramedics, firefighters, maintenance and construction workers, tow truck drivers, all use the roads as their office and need the public support to keep them safe. On Highway 52, you see signs asking people to move over for emergency vehicles. Through education, enforcement, and the hope that one day these reminders will not be needed and people will all move over. If not possible, at the very least, slow down as you're approaching these scenes and you see those emergency lights. This time I'd like to turn the podium over to Lieutenant Nielsen of the Minnesota State Patrol. Thank you.
The Ted Foss Move Over law is important to law enforcement, MnDOT, tow truck drivers, paramedics, and fire. But it's also important to every single citizen in the state. If you're involved in a crash where you hit an emergency vehicle on the side of the road, high likelihood of property damage, likelihood of personal injury or death, and also the heartache you'll have to live with knowing that a family's life was forever changed over something you could have had control over. We ask drivers to be aware, look ahead, scan down the highway, anticipate those lights ahead, and when you see them, reduce your speed, start to make a safe lane change away from those emergency vehicles, and then as you pass, you'll allow them that safety zone, that ability to work. As a state trooper and all police I can speak for, we're always watching traffic just as much as we're watching the people that we're dealing with. We always have an eye turned over our shoulder. And if you can't move over and you slow down, we know you see us. We can recognize you're reducing your speed, and we know then that you know we are there. On Monday, it's the 15-year anniversary of the loss of Corporal Ted Foss. We will have troopers, deputies, and officers throughout the state working the Ted Foss Move Over law in honor of him and reminding drivers of the importance to move over for emergency vehicles. We want the public to know we're out so they can make a good decision, can be aware, and move over safely for all the emergency responders that have to respond to these calls on streets, interstate highways, and freeways. If you're cited for this violation, it's a $100 fine, which is significant, but far greater than that is the avoidance of a crash, and that's what we're really asking for drivers in that compliance. Behind me, the Rochester District Office has recently been renovated, and one of the items they included in this renovation is the Theodore J. Foss Memorial Conference Room. So the room will be adorned with photographs from his time as a state trooper, memorabilia, and all state patrol officers will be able to utilize that room in memorial of Corporal Theodore J. Foss. Is there any questions? Well, distractions are certainly a huge issue right now, and I don't think that trend is going to change soon. The best thing drivers can do is be aware, and putting the phone down is part of that. People get involved in crashes. Good people make bad choices in driving, and there's a lot of good people that go through the heartache of having to know they took someone's life for the rest of their lives with something so preventable. And each of us has to make a conscious decision to put the phone down, remain alert, watch down the highway. And unfortunately, we are going to continue to have to talk about these things. We're always going to have new drivers. Even senior drivers can make mistakes too. And we want to continue to get the word out and make people aware so they can make a good choice. Well, one statistic that we don't have, and we're fortunate to not have, is there's been no deaths since we enacted this law with an officer being hit. So we know we've saved lives. Very high likelihood if this law wasn't in effect, we would have seen other officers, paramedics, firefighters killed on the side of the road. So we don't have that statistic, and that is incredible. What we do see in the winter is we do have a lot of squads getting hit in the winter because the road conditions are not ideal and drivers are driving too fast for the conditions. They may be trying to move over, but the speeds are still contributing to officers being hit. So we do have more squads being hit in inclement weather conditions. We also have more squads out on the roadway in those conditions because other drivers are crashing. So we have a heightened risk in those types of weather days. And reducing speed is the number one thing drivers can do in inclement weather. The speed limit is set for ideal conditions. It's not set for rain or snow, then you should be reducing your speed. But in the summertime, drivers tend to kind of drive on autopilot. They're not as concerned because it's very nice out. They tend to drive faster. They're thinking about other things. So higher speeds is what we see in the summertime, and a higher speed crash hitting a motorist on the side of the road can be deadly. Well, the Ted Foss Move Over law is specific to emergency vehicles or vehicles lighted, including tow trucks on the side of the road. However, we do encourage drivers to move over for stalled motorists, people that are out changing a tire or maybe had a breakdown. Those are also vehicles that, as a courtesy, we should all move over for, allow them to be safe on the side of the road. And that's really where this affects all of us. We've all driven by a stalled motorist that we could have moved over, or there's times our vehicles have had issues we've had to pull over. And freeways and interstates are very dangerous. They're not designed for people, they're designed for fast-moving vehicles. So allowing a courtesy move over to all those motorists, absolutely, we encourage drivers to do that as well.
That's fine. Go ahead. Speak loud.
I don't hear.
That's okay.
Can I lay this? I'll hold it.
Is there anything that you do every year on the anniversary of Ted's death that you'll do on Monday now? Nothing in particular, but
Wait,
I'll to answer that. I think that my mother observes Ted's death every single day.
yeah.
She carries a card with her every single place she goes. I believe every checkout person at Target or the grocery store, every waitress and waiter that has ever served her probably has a Ted Foss Move Over card. And
There he was. When
it
he was
is
fourth grade.
it's our way of remembering him to the fullest. We can
These cards.
if we can save one life by remembering him every single day. This is the Ted Foss Move Over law. We've had them made, the State Patrol makes them for us. And on the back, it describes the Move Over law, what it is all about. And Ted's picture is on the front. We do it in his memory. And
In every
they
bill.
are left in every restaurant we ever go to.
And every bill that I receive.
Oh, yes. We also have stickers that get put on every envelope that goes out in the mail. And
Have those made.
so they all go out
In loving memory.
in loving memory of Ted. Okay. Yes, you're welcome.
If you all go to my car, it's been loaded up with new ones.
We have several, so we can pass them out too, and let you leave them in every restaurant you
I'm
go
past-
to.
So if you want one, you can have one.
Our staff has some, they'll get them to you here.
All right, perfect. It's the only way that we feel we can really preserve Ted's memory and make something good come of his death. It's bittersweet. It's extremely bittersweet because we miss him terribly, but if it saves a life and someone can go home to their family at night without tears, it's a good thing. Even though it's been 15 years, it really feels as raw as it did on the day it happened. So I hope that no one ever questions the validity of the Ted Foss Move Over law, because it truly does save lives. Distracted driving and inattentive driving is really a lousy excuse to take someone's life. So
And support your law enforcement.
we do appreciate the support of
appreciate
all
if you
law
saw-
enforcement. They out
Hear
there
both
doing a
sides
job.
of the story.
Yes.
Always hear both sides.
And all the people standing behind us all have a job to do
Yep.
on the side of a roadway,
Yep.
and they need to be safe too. I've got several friends who are paramedics, who are DOT workers, who, you know, often tell me their stories about being nearly hit. I have several good friends, both in the state patrol and the law enforcement, that have been hit and are fortunate enough to also put their story out there too.
I carry everything inside here.
So, and if you notice, well, we also wear a pin
Oh,
in memory of Ted.
and anytime you want one, just, I think the trunk is loaded with it again.
Any other questions?
And they're so good. And this was his badge. And that can never, ever be worn by anybody else. That's his badge. And then, since his inception was 1929 or 1929, the State Patrol.
Yes.
Okay. And since then, only 8 State Patrolmen's lives have been taken. And if you'll see on this, there's 4 on this side, 4 stars on that side. So Ted was number 8, and he's the last one that has been State Patrolman who has lost his life.
Okay.
So you know that move over law is working. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Back up.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it. Yep. Thank you.
Just one quick thing, if for Shirley's daughter, it's Ramona Jernes, but it's spelled DJERNES. The D is silent. And if you have any other questions or any other needs, we have staff here, or we can get you Lieutenant Nielsen or Sheriff Torgerson if you need them. Thank you.